Hey friends, I want to talk about something that's been very important to me in my writing practice that has formed a baseline for what's possible and really a very fundamental move. Something that I learned at St. John's, which is about questions in writing. So I love questions. I love asking questions. I love receiving questions. I love following the questions that are in my heart. And that attitude is a big part of how I write. And a lot of how I think really good writing happens that might not be obvious to people. It certainly wasn't obvious to me before I learned this. So for a bit of context, I went to St. John's College. It's a liberal arts school, small liberal arts school. Everyone does the same thing there. It's a great book school. So you read the Western classics and you discuss them. And so the classes are conversation based and you discuss them with other people who've just read the thing that you read. And all of the seminars, which is the main class, there's other classes, but the seminars start with a question. You read something like the Iliad or the Odyssey or the Republic or Middlemarch or whatever it is, and the tutor, which is what they call professors at St. John's, will ask a question like, why did this character do this thing? Or what is justice? Or, what does this passage mean? Or what is Shakespeare trying to get at in this play or something? It's usually a specific question and a good one for that reading. And in that way, they're kind of modeling what a good question is through sharing with you what their question is for discussion. And then for the first, 15, 30 minutes of the conversation, you talk about that question that they ask, and sometimes the whole 2 hours. And of course, it might move on to other questions that come up, and you talk about them, you address them, you try to answer them. And one of the tutors that I was connected to at St. John's, Mr. Pastille, who was my boss when I was a writing assistant at St. John's Annapolis, he showed me through a class that he led, it was like a extracurricular writing class, that you can actually structure your writing around questions. And this was sort of implicit in the St. John's model, but he really made it very explicit and very clear and very tactical. So in your annual essays, every year you would write an essay. It was supposed to start with a question in the same way that the discussion classes, the seminars, would start with a question. So you would take a book that you're really serious about and you would ask a question, or you just start with a question and then pick a book after that. Ideally, they kind of went hand in hand. And so, my senior year, for example, there was a passage early on in the Phaedrus where my question was like, what does this phrase mean? Socrates said in the translation I was using, if I do not know Phaedrus, I have forgotten even myself, but neither of these is so. And I was like, well, what does he mean by that? And what is self-knowledge if we figure out what he means by that? And my essay was about that. And, it was an essay, not my best, not my worst. I liked other essays that I wrote that year more. But that was the structure of the essay. It was an attempt to answer that question. It was an attempt to understand that sentence and also what self-knowledge meant in Plato's Phaedrus. And that was the structure of the essay. And Mr. Pastille, when I went to this class, really made it very tactical in that not only would there be a question at the beginning of the essay, at the end of the first paragraph, kind of in the way that, a 5-paragraph essay in high school would have a thesis at the end. In the same way, at a St. John's essay, you would have a question at the end of, say, the first paragraph or the first page or whatever. But then he showed, you can make an outline of questions, right? So, okay, there's this broad level question. What is self-knowledge that I want to ask? And first, I'll ask, what does Socrates mean by this specific phrase? And how is knowing Phaedrus different than knowing himself? And what does it mean that he has memory there? And how is this connected to the dramatic setting of the dialogue? Because with Plato, the sort of dramatic details are always meaningful in the conversation. And what is Phaedrus like as a person? How is he different than Socrates? Like, those are all questions you could ask about that dialogue, and then Mr. Pastille was like, okay, generate a bunch of questions and then order them, put them in a logical order, and then try to answer each question one by one. And then if you have your answers, then you can kind of remove the questions, or not, but you can remove the questions and be like, what is Phaedrus's character, for example? That could be the question, and then you answer, well, Phaedrus seems to really like eloquence and beauty in words and pretty things, and that shows that he's kind of superficial and lacking moral depth, and he's probably cruising for a bruising where he's gonna run into some problems because he'll misjudge people who seem attractive on the surface but are actually kind of scummy on the inside or something like that. That could be an answer to that question. I'm just riffing here. Don't quote me about the Phaedrus. It's been a long time since I read it. But the point is that's an answer, and then you could remove the question, remove them with each of your answers, and that would form the basis of a first draft. And that, if you take the model of questions and answers, which is so native to us from conversations, that's such a compelling approach to writing for at least two reasons. One is it means you're never facing a blank page, right? Like I never face a blank page. I don't forgotten what that's like, because there's always something, there's an idea or a question or some snippet of something that I'm wanting to work with, and having a question is a really good basis for that, where you're like, okay, what do I think about this thing I really care about anyway? And like, why do I think that? And what life experiences have I had around that? That's three questions right there, each of which could be a page or 5 pages to answer. And then you don't have a blank page, right? You have these questions that invite answers out of you in the same way that when someone asks a question in conversation, you're just inclined to answer. It doesn't take that much effort. You know, someone asks you a specific question, then you answer. They asked you for a reason, and you have something to say about that. In the same way, you're not facing a blank page, and there's this momentum around, oh yeah, I have things to say about this. And so that's one reason, is just practically it means you don't have to face a blank page. But also, and I feel this was so important to the St. John's model of writing, there's an authenticity in that, right? There's a truth to it. There's a vulnerability where if it's a question, it could be a question like, if I ask someone a question on my podcast, typically they have an answer to it. They have something to say about it. But it could also be a question about something that like you were genuinely uncertain about. Like, I don't know, something that you're chewing on that's important to you, that's actively meaningful to you, but you don't have a full answer to yet, right? There's an openness to that and an incompleteness that's intellectually honest, right? That was something that in retrospect I didn't understand at the time, but that I found kind of revolting about the 5-paragraph model that I was taught in high school, or the sort of like thesis-based essay where it's like, I have this argument and I know what I want to say and I am going to say it and I'm going to convince you of it because I am right and I know what the truth is. And it's like, no, I'm a high schooler. I have no freaking clue. And why am I putting on airs of certainty and authority when I haven't even figured out anything about myself or my own life? Instead, an essay really can be, in the original sense, right? Like to try, SAA, it's to try to make an attempt to do something. You're like, no, there's something here that I care about, that I'm passionate about, and I want to explore it, right? So a question, the format of a question and answers lets you bring that intellectual honesty to it, where it's like, I know I have something to say here. I know I care about this. I know I'm curious about that, but I'm not sure yet what it is. And I'm going to explore that. And I'm going to dialogue with myself through writing about what I think. And then you can choose to remove the questions if you want. This was a very specific tactic that Mr. Pastille taught that I've used many times, of generating questions, ordering them, answering them, removing the questions, and then letting that be the first draft of an essay that you then massage and refine and expand on and whatever. That's a really, really, really terrific way to write. I used to have a whole course about it, host writing, which is now defunct, but has been rolled into the Digital Productivity Coach. So you get it as an advanced, at least sections of it as an advanced material in there. But I just said the basic idea. So I think that has been so valuable to me, again, both tactically so that I don't have to face a blank page, but also spiritually. So I'm intellectually honest, so that I'm authentic, so that I'm vulnerable, so I don't have to pretend I have all the answers. I'm just bringing my curiosity to the writing and following the questions that are actually there for me. Like, what do I care about here? Why am I curious? What is it that I want to know from writing this essay? What is it that I want to communicate? What is it that I want to learn? How do I want to explore? And having questions and answers available as a move for writing has just been so powerful for me. So I wanted to share that whole gestalt and some of those ideas in case it's useful to you in your own writing practice. Would love to hear what you think. Feel free to share in the comments.